welcome to everybody, and thank you to all of you who've taken the time out of your day to come and hear some of our thoughts and findings. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you end up feeling good at the end of it. So we're going to start with who we are, just very briefly, because obviously we've had a small introduction, but I'm Gurvinder Khurana, and I'm a director at Moser, and I cover the whole of the EMEA region. My background, is design.
Right. Oh, it is working. I'm Kim Morgan. I'm the lead for sustainability and wellbeing, also in the EMEA region. I originally have a background in design as well, but have specialised in sustainability for about 15 years now.
So an interesting topic. We are talking today about neuroaesthetics. It's a relatively new subject. Probably research spans about 20 years now, so it's in its infancy. But really what it's found is to explore the neural basis of aesthetic experience by examining how the brain processes and responds to beauty, artistic elements, and creativity. So we wanted to give you the definition so that we all start on the same page. As humans, we're all driven and impacted by millions of different things. One thing we can be sure of is that we all react to them differently, and they impact us at a physical level, a logical level, and an emotional level. And the exciting thing about neuroaesthetics is that it's starting to recognise the importance of emotions. So it's an emotional response, and as designers, when we're thinking about space, when we're designing space, we have a responsibility to give consideration to how people are going to feel in those spaces and how they're going to experience those spaces. The one thing that we can be sure of is that we are all different, and each person's experience will be different. And that's the beauty, actually, of being human. So that's quite exciting to recognise. But we thought we'd show you a little snapshot. Might be frightening, might be beautiful, you decide. But this is a snapshot of my brainwaves and Kim's brainwaves. So this comes out of a really exciting piece of work and investigation that our brand and marketing team and designers were involved in last year for London Design Week. And this is an initiative called Resonance, where we map the emotional response to using an EEG headset. And what it does is it reads and translates through waves, brain waves, represented in colour, what the experience of the brain is at that point. It's really, really fascinating because both of these were done in the same conditions, in the same environment, with the sound, stimulation, all exactly the same. And yet the responses are completely different. So there's a snapshot into the workings of two wonderful minds. To give you a little bit of something just on that as well, the red and the colours, no, that's okay. The colours have a little bit of meaning. So the red is gamma. And I'm going to just, because I'm not very good at remembering these sorts of things, but gamma is high energy and swift information, whereas the green obviously is a sense of calm. So that tells you loads. So why is it important? Well, I've worked in design for probably too long now, over 20 years, and it's a subject, an industry that I am hugely passionate about and still love very much. I started my career even as a student thinking about how important emotion in our experience of environments was. We talk, neuroaesthetics talks a lot about art and beauty, but actually our environments are places of art, of places of beauty, if they're curated correctly. And so they affect us. And this has been a passion point for me since I was in my 20s. Don't ask how old I am now. But our industry is becoming ever more complicated and ever more faceted, in actual fact. And it's changed hugely since I came in. But I think we have to take a step back and we have to think about why. Why is design Why is interior design, workplace design, why is it important? Because that's the nub of why neuroaesthetics is important. So why do we go to work? Because as a workplace designer, I'm looking at workplaces all the time. Why do we go to work? Well, we go for some very practical reasons, actually. We go because that's where we find our community. That's where we find our friends. We go because we want a sense of purpose or belonging. We go because some of us are ambitious. Some of us want to have a family, and that's money and responsibility. But we all have our reasons. And some of us just go to work because we love to work. But all of us have a reason. And all of it is down to be able to live the life that we want to live and pay for what we want from that life. That's the fundamental commas of why we work. And I think it's actually really important to remember that point, because that's what we want. And businesses want us to be great at what we do, to provide an environment that allows us to flourish so that they can be profitable. And I think that's really important. Businesses need their people to help them make profit. So their people need to be in the best environment so that they can do their best work. And the only way that's going to happen is if you feel good about yourself. And you feel good about the place that you're in, the culture that you're in, and the environment supports the things that are really important to you. And that's why workplace design and interior design, because it stems across to hospitality design, retail design, all of those things make us feel something when we go. And that's why we part with our money a lot of the time. So it's psychology.
So we mentioned the interplay between what employees want and what the employers want. We do feel there is really a very strong business case for this. Partly the greater interest now in neuroaesthetics has come from a much greater understanding in society about neurodiversity. Now, this might be the range of people, the amount of people with a specific neurodiverse condition, such as autistic spectrum, dyslexia, or another specific way of being, of which the creative industry is absolutely full of us. Or just the fact that, as Gurvinder said earlier, the way we all experience the world is completely unique, but it's also not constant for individuals either. We all want different things out of our workplace at different times of day, different seasons, depending on what tasks we need to get done. And we've started to realize that how we design buildings and workplaces is really important for actually getting the most out of people. A few statistics, which are probably not going to be unfamiliar to people. In the US, they've realized that 85% of people with autism in the US are unemployed, but the vast majority of those want to be in work. It is the case with a lot of people with neurodiverse or atypical brains often struggle to fit in. In the past, we've often thought, oh, some people, they're just not suited for office life. They just don't thrive. They just don't like being in the office environment. That's not really good enough anymore, because we've realized that everybody benefits. And this is matched with the fact that anybody involved in recruitment knows there's a huge skills shortage. So we've got all these people who want to work, feel uncomfortable in their surroundings, matched with people who really want to be able to bring them into the work. Also, it's been found, Deloitte did a study that shows that businesses with a much more neurodiverse workforce, and specifically a neurodiverse board, are much more profitable. They're much more creative. They're much more innovative. There are huge benefits to any organization from having that range of thought processes actually involved in the business. And also, as we've said, different people at different points, depending on what tasks they're doing, want to have a different environment to be able to get the most out of to be able to give their best performance. But as we said, this is hugely complex. We are born with 100 billion neurons. All of these are firing off differently in relation to our environment. And this showed within the Resonance exhibition just how complex and how diverse everybody is. So how are we going to tackle this? The most important thing is to tackle it with empathy. We we're all moving away from this idea of fitting an employee into an office and thinking more about how do we design spaces that reflect what people want. It's one thing for an office where people may need to be, but if it's a space such as hospitality or retail where people have a choice, how are you making that inviting and inclusive, and how is that making people feel? So traditionally, you'll all be very familiar with the basic 5 senses, which we all consider in varying degrees within our environment, from things such as smell and taste, which you may not be getting from your actual building fabric, hopefully, but obviously from the delicious food that's been put on, things like the smell of coffee, flowers, and things like this that all bring a positive or negative, but very emotional response. To what we're seeing, both the quality of the daylight, the complexity of things that we're looking at, the acoustics of a space, and the feeling of different surfaces. This is all things that are going to be explored throughout Clerkenwell, and anybody who's been having a look around will see how that's incorporated. But as we understand more about the complexity of the emotional response and the human condition, there are more as well, which are actually shaping that emotional response as well. One of these, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, is proprioception, which is something that most people aren't familiar with the phrase, but it is the concept of being able to feel your body within an environment and being aware of where your body is without having to look at it. And it's very closely linked to things like balance. And this is all linked to your comfort levels and how just stable you feel within an environment. And also, of course, at the worst end of this spectrum, is pain. This is the absolute worst experience of being in an environment. So we've looked at, how these can be incorporated into a set series of measures and have a kind of toolkit for this.
Yeah, it's interesting because in neuroaesthetics there is beginning to be a debate that there might be up to 33 senses, which I think is wild. But when you start scratching the surface of that, what you find is that they are all still linked back to those main 8 senses. Interestingly, though, they start to take the layers off, if you like, on how we respond at a very deep emotional level to those main elements, and actually to what we are calling our briefcase full of a kit of parts. So these are the neuroaesthetic design principles, and I'll just read them out because I think it's important to say them out, because all of these things are, for the designers in the room, they're probably things that you do intuitively. What's exciting is that we now are able to articulate it and we can go in and start talking about this. And that's where making the business case really comes in, because we're able to explain it to people. So we know that we all react to scent and smell. We all look for personalization and control. There's always a sense of materiality and texture. Biophilia is a big word. Technology, light, sound, and acoustics, they're very present in a lot of what we do. The meaning and storytelling, spatial composition, colour, movement, flow, they are all part of this briefcase, this kit of parts that you take in with you as professionals to be able to dial up or dial down as you need. Because this is not about having every single one of these things on every job, otherwise there'd be sensory overload. But it's about knowing how to lift them and bring them back down, and how to actually use them. So we thought the best way to explain this further was to share some case studies where we feel that they articulate how you could do this. Now, some of these will resonate with you and some will go, oh my God, that's just too much. But that's the idea. The idea is that we take our experience, we go in to see clients, we have engagement, we talk to them, and we understand what they need, and then we understand really how to use our kit of parts to get the best for them out of it, because we want their people to feel tremendous or productive or happy or joyous or calm. And all of those words need an aesthetic visual explanation.
So yes, as Gurvinder said, there's quite a range here. We've deliberately chosen a range of different projects to show you. Some of these you might look at them and think they're a bit underwhelming for you. They're too calm. Some of them might be too busy, there might be too much going on. And that just really illustrates how different everybody is within their environment and how everybody wants different things. So the first case study is a very, very specific project that we've recently completed in New York in Hudson Yards for D.E. Shaw, who are a global financial firm. So this particular building is in a brand new skyscraper. It's between the 45th and 53rd floor, I think. So it's right up in the sky. And they wanted two specific things from their workplace. So firstly, the purpose of this office and most of the employees within it was the more complex algorithms and algorithm development and analytics. Highly technical, highly specialist work. And they identified quite early on that the vast majority of their workforce had a very specific neurological makeup. A lot of them had ASD diagnosis, were very prone to overstimulation, and they wanted an environment that did not distract them or cause them any kind of distress while they were going on with their work. The second point is that their previous office was very dim. And this one, they had this opportunity with this up in the sky new building to have a huge amount of daylight. And they really wanted to be able to bring that into the space. Daylighting has a huge amount of benefits, not only for its energy reduction, you need less artificial lighting, but it brings that connection to nature. It's much more complex form of light, which is really beneficial to us. And having that connection with what's going on outside really helps with our natural rhythms, our circadian rhythms. So one way, this is a really good example of how we really use technology in able to help design this. So you can see from the plan here, it's a huge floor plan. It's absolutely enormous. And so even though it's fully glass, there is that risk of everywhere being too dark near the core. So we used daylight modeling, which we use a lot in all of our projects now, to help understand how daylight was penetrating the space and how we could improve that. And you can see there's some before and afters here, using a more standard setup, more standard internal finishes, and windows with just a partial shading, but sort of constant shading on them. You're not getting a huge amount of daylight penetration in. By making a few adjustments, so using more of a slatted blind and highly reflective internal surfaces, we were actually able to bounce the light much further into the building. So you're getting penetration of daylighting right into these internal meeting rooms. And you can see this more clearly in these more colourful diagrams here, where you can see either the orange or the green moving further into the building and really providing quite good daylighting further into the building with these relatively simple changes, which we wouldn't know about if we hadn't modelled it. In addition to this project has, what you can see here is a very calming, very neutral palette. You can get a feeling just how high up this is. The views are incredible from this space. But there's a lot of neutral colours, a lot of natural materials, a lot of curves and light finishes. And this helps a lot with the reflectivity and bringing that daylighting in, but also is providing that calming space.
I think to add to that, the other thing that you get from this, if you look at what biophilia truly means, it's not plant pots. That's somebody who's gone on some trailblaze of what they think biophilia is and lost the plot. But biophilia is represented here by things like the natural light, but also the grounding in the colour palette, which is actually an earth colour. So you end up with a sense of calm by the use of that colour. The curves are gentle, they are echoed in the interior architecture as well as the choice of furniture. But also what it does, it takes consideration of one of the other words in our toolkit, which is movement. And movement can be really beneficial for some people to be very gentle, to be slow, to just bring the pace down, because that also helps with the way people experience and feel as they travel through a space. So actually, it's very deliberate to marry those sort of natural tones, to bring in that sense of earth, and then couple that with these gentle curves that allow you to move, bring your blood pressure down, and have you move gently through the space. So hospitality, that's slightly different, but it bleeds into a lot of what we do in workplace. So I think this is quite an interesting sort of field that we are all probably sort of tinkering around the edges on if you're in workplace, but if you're in beyond, then you're probably very aware of this. But hospitality, the next case study, looks at how we use light, colour, texture, and again, all of them will have a level of biophilic influence. So this is a global drinks brand, it's Diageo, and this was delivered in APAC from one of our APAC teams. And this is really interesting because the idea was that the brand needed to be front and centre. Now, when you have a buzzy brand like Diageo, where it's all about drinks and it's about fun and hospitality and vibrancy and energy, how do you do that in an office space to enable people to do their best work as well? Because we know that ultimately they also need to make a profit, and they need their people to be able to perform. So this then looks at things like bringing those grounded tones in, having the natural timbers to give it a level of stability. You can see the natural rug material. So it's materials, it's natural materials, it's natural colours, but it's also providing hidden acoustics and placement of various functions so that you still have that draw and sense of hospitality, but you know that there are workspaces and it's designed to dial it down. So you create a sense of energy through some of the reflective elements in the bar area, but it's balanced out with other things. So you can see here, there is no way you could work at your laptop there if the acoustics were like something in a nightclub. So it's all concealed and thought through, but there is a sense of calm because of the materiality and the warmth and the way that the space has been lit with a lot of indirect lighting to pull that through. Is there one more? Yeah. And then again, you see that continue through. So again, the use of reflective materials, but it gives it a sense of grounding. And then you can dial that up and up the tempo, which is this one. And this again, another APAC client. Actually, this is taking hospitality and dialing up the tempo with all of the elements we saw before. And this is for Sony in Mumbai. So again, you've got that same element of biophilia through the timbers and the warmth and trying to draw the light through. But this, with the whole idea of the client wanted a sense of a members bar and very much sort of grounded in the idea that all the musicians can come in and hang out. So this particular spot is for them to hang out in. So you need the vibrancy, you want the energy, but you still need people to feel a sense of calm because they might come in and sit here before they perform. And that is the idea that they will perform here as well. So you have all of those functionalities as well as people needing to do their day job. And so all of these natural materials, again, just give everybody a sense of grounding. But there are smattered around places where all of that has been taken away, and you can come, because we accept everybody is different and the clients understand and they've been educated that people are different, you need to provide spaces that allow you to completely dial it down.
So getting back into more about biophilia, which is, I know we've mentioned it a lot, but it is a very popular term at the moment. It's used a lot. You will have heard about it a lot, but it's very often misunderstood. And a real example of how you can use this is our very own living lab. You might spot some of our models around the building today, because this shows that there are many elements to it. The first thing people think about in terms of biophilia is green space and plants, but access to water or blue space is actually far more potent. We're hugely lucky in that we have this wonderful riverside office, but our office was chosen for this purpose. Our previous office was next to the Thames. Nobody wanted to get rid of our Thames views. And this sense that you can see the river right throughout the building, and we've reflected that in the finishes we've used and in the patterns we've used, is really important to us. It's such a dynamic thing. Anybody who's looked at the Thames for a lot will realize this. It's very calming, but it's very energizing as well, and it has huge benefits to us.
One other thing that's really interesting, though, because we're now gone from a 5th floor to a ground floor.
Yes.
We're almost at eye level with the river. And what we're finding is that the number of people coming in and feeling the calm has shot up in the last few months. And that's fascinating to watch. So people are responding to wanting to be in this space, just because you do come in and within about 10 steps, you are almost level with the river.
The other thing that we really managed to do very well here, I feel, is bringing in that daylighting. Because, again, we've got more floor-to-ceiling glazing. We've got a huge amount of daylighting coming into the space, but that also brings risks of glare, of overheating, which we wanted to minimize. So, again, we modeled this very early on. We do this in-house. We do this for most of our projects now, to get an understanding of where the daylight and the overheating risks were, so that we could lay out the space accordingly. So in the bottom corner here, you can see the daylighting plot that we did for this, which we did before we even did any of the test fits. So these lighter areas are maximum daylighting, with the darker areas of blue in the middle. So all of our core spaces, are meeting rooms, are in the middle. They don't need as much daylight. They're used occasionally. Well, they're used constantly, but for small periods of time. And also, by putting them in this cooler core, reduces the risk of solar overheating. Anybody who has small meeting rooms next to a glass facade will realize they get warm. By contrast, our library areas, our main workstations, are all around this perimeter with maximum daylighting. And you can generally spot this bit really popular for a start. And these desks, you are lucky to get one of these with the proper river views. So you can really see the benefit that people get from that and how popular they are. Also, we touched on the biophilia of materials. Something that, again, I think we've used very successfully here, which we've been trying to use in a lot of our projects, is cork. We've used it as flooring in the project, but we've also used it as a backdrop here. People are wary of cork. It can scream 70s to people. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not always the look people are going for. But in reality, it's a fantastic material. It's incredibly sustainable. It's practically carbon neutral. It's great for regulating moisture in the air. It has no nasties in it, and it's constantly replenishing. So we love it. And as well as that, the complexity visually of it is another element of biophilia, because part of what makes us feel good in nature is the visual complexity around us, which connects with us in quite a deep part of our mind.
We need to collect all the corks from the wine bottles and start creating a new flooring type. This is this is a continuation of biophilia, but I think why we wanted to show this is because it's quite contrasting to the previous example. And I think biophilia actually has been a constant on each case study. It comes in at some level to every project. Here we were asked to look at it if there's a terrace beyond those sort of windows, but very much asked to look at it in terms of an industrial building and how you make that feel both welcoming, warm and calm, but introduce it playfully. And so the idea here was that actually we just dialed up the colour palette again, a bit like the Sony project. So but with biophilic colour references rather than high energy colours. So for example, the Sony and the red is a high energy element. This is very much relating to all the foliage you can see below. So you've got a very industrial set of structures that have been painted to look and mimic the colours of nature. And by changing all of those colours along the balustrade so that there's a variety of greens, actually is as playful as the planting down in the pot. So what you're doing is you're mimicking all of that natural variation that you get in natural plants, not in artificial plants, I have to say. And then that's continued with the timber floor. And again, the natural leathers, it's all sort of speaking to those elements that actually really resonate with us at a very deep and emotional level. Things that perhaps we don't always understand. And we struggle to put data to, but things that we're now beginning to start investigating on. And you can see that continues through. It is quite an industrial principle, but all of this welcome area, which is a concierge space that we did with BCG, that's all planted and taking inspiration, a bit like our display here. You know, people think sometimes that nature and colour of nature is only the mud tones, but actually you think about Chelsea Flower Show, you think about the footfall they'll get, look at around you here. There is nature and blossom and bloom and colour. And it's just then knowing how to pepper that across our schemes.
Then the next case study really brings together a lot of quite complex issues. This is one of our most technologically advanced projects, and it's bringing together, it's showing how technology can help both in personalization and control of the environment, but also in creating a sense of community and making people feel welcome. So this project is a real flagship. This is the HSBC offices, again in New York, in Hudson Yards, in the Spiral, which is a very iconic new building there. So this is a real flagship both for us and for HSBC. As you can see, this is a very dynamic space. It has a very high floor-to-ceiling height, which really adds the drama. It's also enormous. Again, like Dee Shaw, the floor plates are much greater than we're used to seeing in London. And there are an awful lot of people here. So they have a lot of people working in lots of different functions with a lot of different requirements, all coming into this very dynamic, very varied space. Just an example here of the different types of spaces that we've got here, from the more hospitality type and more communal spaces around here to this is part of the Wellbeing suite. Very calming, even down to this is a really lovely textured plaster, which adds more of a natural finish. So this shows, as well as how I've mentioned we use technology in the design process, this shows some of the other ways that you can use technology to really enhance well-being and bring some of those neuroaesthetics to the design. Firstly, buildings like this, of this size, of this complexity, they need incredibly intelligent and complex control systems. As we understand more about how our bodies respond to different stimuli, you have to really be able to fine-tune this. We often, our bodies sense we're becoming uncomfortable before we realize that we're too hot or it's too dark. If you can actually have a more intelligent building system that can preempt that, you're not waiting until the meeting room is really stuffy and everyone's falling asleep before you're changing the ventilation, or that the lighting conditions are quite off. It's sensing that and it's changing that before it actually becomes an impact for you. The other thing is then to sense what is actually going on in the space and use that to relay this information to the employees. Any of you who work in a larger office may be aware of wandering around the office, trying to find the space that you want to sit in, the meeting room that you want, the quiet space, the lively space, whatever it is you want out of that, out of your workstation today. It wastes your time, it winds you up, it is not conducive to any kind of well-being. Obviously, they have this on a massive scale because it's huge. So what we were able to do with this project is we have a whole network of very intelligent sensors, which are looking at the air quality, the acoustics, whether rooms are occupied or not, so how buzzy they are, the lighting levels, a whole variety of different stimuli. And that is then mapped to a dashboard, which employees can use to find what they want, whether it's a meeting room that is definitely free, so they're not going to walk across the building and find somebody's in it, to a quiet corner or somewhere where the lighting is just what they're after. So that helps not only with wayfinding, but also with a sense of community. It can help people find what they need in a space and feel more welcome and feel more at home. So that's a look of what everybody's doing already. But we wanted to touch on what the future of this, what is coming next. As we said, this is rapidly growing, both in terms of the technology and our understanding of it, and things are changing quite quickly. And I think there's some really exciting work going on in here. So this case study, which we're really excited about, is the Circadian Hotel in Chicago. It's just got planning permission. So we're very excited for this one. As the name suggests, for those of you who are a bit more familiar with wellbeing, this is all about the circadian rhythms that are inherent in people and animals, and it is basically about how the amount of daylighting you're getting and when impacts your sort of natural bodily rhythms. This is why it's meant to be so good for you to get up in the morning and get out and get sunlight because it wakes you up. Why a lot of people struggle with winter when you're getting less light, and why you feel so messed up if you've traveled across time zones, and you're completely out of whack. It's partly because your circadian rhythm is not working. Your brain doesn't know where it is. The lighting is hitting it at all different times. And this is because the levels and quality of daylighting actually impact our hormone productions, particularly melatonin, which is what helps you get to sleep. So recognizing that everybody has a very busy life with lots of people traveling around, they wanted to take hospitality to a new level. So as well as this being an exemplar net zero building and having very high levels of well-being in terms of WELL certification, these hotel rooms will be able to understand where you've come from and help tweak the lighting to help get your circadian rhythms back in line, which should help you feel more refreshed and better able to adjust. I'm really hoping this comes online really quickly all around the world because I really struggle with jet lag.
It is, I mean, as Kim said, it's through planning. It is the aim at the moment, although you never know with developments, is to be completed by the end of 2026. Watch this space because I do think it's an incredibly interesting interesting idea and concept that people have certainly bought into. It has, as a development, it has over 100 hotel rooms. It will have 3 floors dedicated to F&B. Excuse me. It will have co-working space at ground, and it will also have a food and beverage experience centre sponsored by the Four Seasons at the top. So it's very much also about saying, well, let's just section off what we're doing here. So these are rooms that are going to be set for people to sleep and recharge in. This is where you will work in the co-working space. So it starts to really consider the fact that we need a break, and emotionally and holistically, we need to be able to separate out sometimes. So as a development, it's pushing the boundaries of the idea that we have to do everything all the time, everywhere, and starting to pull that apart. Oh, here we go. And so that is very green. And so where we are at the moment, you know, we're already seeing sensors in projects. We're seeing real-time tracking of emotions and bodies. We're seeing AI-driven cognitive experience. We're seeing adaptive lighting. We're seeing adaptive sounds. So things are already happening. I think the next stage we're going to start seeing is people responding. This is going to be a learning process, but we are already hearing about wearables. We're hearing about retinal scanning. We're hearing about immersive neuroaesthetic experiences. So and I think we've seen some at Clerkenwell actually yesterday. So it's really interesting, and our resonance is one of those. But all of these things are going to continue pushing the boundaries, encouraging people to ask the questions and help the data come through. Because what this will allow us to do is really learn about how we interact and how we respond to the built environment particularly, but to spaces, both a cognitive, a physical and a logical, but also really importantly at an emotional level. Thank you.